Well, it's wonderful to be here with you today, Liz. Of course, you're an eminent management consultant, coach, somebody with lots and lots of admirers, including especially myself. You published in all the best places, Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and others. You have a great TEDx talk, and you have Better at Work with Liz, this new brilliantly creative animation series that we'll no doubt touch upon, which I heartily recommend. The URL is of the same name. And today we're going to talk about what really happens at work in business. Going underneath the covers, we're going to talk about conflict, high performance, politics, and frankly, anything we want to, but really trying to get to a sort of what really happens beyond what you might read in blogs and other places. And I'm just delighted to be here with you today, Liz.
I'm so happy to be with you, David. I can't wait to hear what we're going to do.
Indeed. It will be a journey and it will be organic. Fantastic. So let's talk about conflict. Not because I like conflict, but it's a feature of organizations, right? Sometimes very overt, sometimes hidden. And I guess, and my experience over a few years now is organizations vary in how conflict is treated, encouraged, or talked about. I guess the first simple question is, how important is conflict at work to do good work?
You've already raised so many issues. I'm going to pick around in there. Sometimes people think of this as semantics, but conflict is only what we name it. We call it conflict when we don't like it, or we think it involves anger or fighting. There are loads of times that we have different opinions and it doesn't matter that much.
Yes.
It's that we call it a conflict, and we don't call it a conflict until it starts to feel uncomfortable. And then we think, what is this ooky thing? Oh, it's a conflict. But we argue with ourselves all the time.
Yes.
I assume you do that. I certainly do that.
Absolutely, yes.
We say we are of multiple minds, or we say a part of me wants this and a part of me wants that. We're completely familiar with the need to reconcile different viewpoints constantly. And if it goes okay, we sort of don't pay attention. We don't count it. It's only when we feel ourselves getting tense or frustrated, or so often it's a conflict based on how your body's responding.
I'm fascinated by that. I guess that sort of, you stop breathing as well. You feel tense. You can perhaps go red in the face depending on your demeanor and so forth. And obviously, a lot of the conflict starts in the head and then manifests into an argument and so forth. But if you're a person who wants, I guess, a conflict of perspective or ideas as opposed to a conflict of it's quite a strong word, isn't it? When you say it, conflict is quite aggressive, isn't it? But if you're somebody who wants debate and discourse to see the best ideas, but doesn't want it to tip over into more emotive aspects, what are the sort of things that you've seen that can really help people be on the right side of it?
Again, the language is important. It's great to say we're going to have a conversation about our diverse views.
That's nice.
Just the fact that you are acknowledging we have diverse views and you are treating it as a valuable proposition. It's why I've invited you all here today, or it's why we do focus groups with our customers, or it's whatever the specifics of the dialogue are. The fact that we have convened specifically to have ideas together, well, that changes the tenor right away, doesn't it?
Yes.
As opposed to we show up to a meeting knowing we're going to have a fight because you head sales and marketing and I head operations, and we have a fight every Tuesday.
Yes.
Right? So the context is just so important. And it was so interesting to me that you started off by saying that it's a feature of work life, because it's sort of a feature of human.
Yes, it's much deeper than that, isn't it? Yes. I'm curious then, if you're in that conversation, it's being framed in the elegant way that you've described, and yet there are still moments where it tips over into people making it feel very personal, perhaps aggressive behavior. How, if you're the chair of that discussion, how do you, if you like, not completely shut it down, but also, if you like, I guess, protect uh, the meeting and the values that you hold dear? What interventions could you make?
So it doesn't happen that quickly if people aren't primed for it. You, if you are the facilitator or the chair, you hear when people start getting a little tense.
Mm.
And why would that happen? If you really zoom out, why would that happen? It only happens if people are attached to the idea or the theory or the argument that they're presenting.
Mm.
They have a stake in it. It is no longer just the realm of the mind. There are expectations that real things will happen, and some of them will not be good for me.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I have something to protect or defend. And that may be a feature of organization, because if I'm a department head, a decision that gets made in this meeting may affect the lives of the people I feel responsible for and I care about deeply. And
Mm.
you can see exactly how that becomes sort of, red cloth in front of the bull.
Yes.
So
Yes.
as the chair, the first thing is to know your people if you can. If you're a professional facilitator, it's different. But if you are the executive responsible for these groups, these people, and these ideas, there are all kinds of things, and they all depend on what the specifics are. So, this is like no medication is the same for any person, depends on
Mm.
everything from the size of the body and therefore how it will absorb to what other medications are being taken. So,
Mm.
none of this should be taken on its face as a thing you should run and do. You have to incorporate it into what already exists.
Mm.
That being said, respect for all parties and for the fact that their concerns have value and therefore are important to all of us is one of the most important ground rules you can set.
Yeah, so right.
And that goes back not just to the ground rules for this meeting, but the culture of the organization we're in. Do we believe that? So that when we remind ourselves in the specific meeting, we're reminding ourselves, yes, this is how we are every day, as opposed to, oh, we're going to be special here in this meeting.
Yes. Yes. That can actually make it worse, can't it? I mean, where
Mm,
you actually have a really great meeting and then it creates a massive gap to your lived reality the rest of the time. And you think, hang on, what's going on here? But your point about respect, I completely agree. It's easy to say and often hard to practice because it means that people, people have different styles, backgrounds, ways of expressing themselves. You have to, in a way, give more space. Where I guess I've been in discussions and probably been guilty of it myself, where I believe that, but then I've gone to a sort of mono way of doing things, which is just expedient. We're on the clock. Let's get stuff done. I respect everyone, but let's be clear. Whoever's the quickest, shout loudest, fast. Let's get a decision made. So there's
yes.
something around respecting somebody and then actually showing the respect. Yeah, the showing it takes real skill, right?
Part of the challenge is it is completely ineffective to demand it.
Mm.
And, in any of those conversations where someone says, well, you have to respect me, right away, there's a problem.
Yes.
It is something that is a phase zero.
Mm.
before we got into the room that had
Mm.
to be established. And it can be built on all kinds of different things, from people's knowledge and experience to how many times we've seen them mess up and
Yes.
how they handled that. There are all kinds of things. These
Yes.
are
Yes.
very complex concepts. But in the same way, the current science on brainstorming
Mm.
is not to have everybody spew out their ideas, because the loudest, fastest person
Yes.
will appear to have the most ideas.
Mm.
And so the current approach is, we're going to brainstorm, but first we're doing it ourselves. Everybody write down 10 ideas.
Yes. Yes.
And then sometimes having other people share your ideas so that you are not the representative. Neutralizing, in a way, the way we already think about each other,
Yes.
and treating the ideas as ideas. So all of this says we're actually not well prepared for disagreement.
Mm.
We think disagreement generally is a zero-sum game.
Mm.
And that comes from having once been children,
Yes.
when
Yes.
in many cases it is the big adult who wins, no matter how strongly you might feel about your position as a 5-year-old, and
Mm.
even if you're right. And so we learn from that experience, and then from the school experience. Louder, faster, the physical,
Yes.
more favored is another
Mm.
way to win. There are
Mm.
all these ways
Yes.
to win, and the other person loses. And so what we really need is an environment in which we consider things together on their merits, and we have a practice of doing so.
That's so well put. So
Frightening,
well
though.
put. Yes. Yes.
Hard
Yes.
work.
Yeah. I mean, it's proper work. One of the things I really like about what you said is that you and I and others can give stimuli on how to think about these things, but you have to make your own mind up, because it's so specific to the context you're in, the specific interaction, the people involved. So you sort of have to make your own mind up, as opposed to saying there is one way of doing it. So,
Right.
for example, on brainstorming, I've seen and used that approach of everyone writing it down either beforehand or during it, in virtual environments, for example. But also, I've seen research and used this myself actually too late in life a little bit, where the group exercises is framing the questions,
Yes.
and actually you encourage people to go away in their own time, because some people think better when they're on their own and then come back afterwards. The
Yes.
point is, there's lots of different ways. You don't have to try one way in particular. I want to just continue the theme of, I guess, the journey of a conversation and discussion. That's what we're on at the moment. You talked about people coming prepped for or expecting some form of fight or conflict. What about in an environment where some of the people have stuff going on outside work, whether
Mm.
that's direct conflict or other things, and whatever's being discussed, they're bringing or potentially are bringing other aspects of their life into a conversation. If you're the leader of that discussion in that group and you have an inkling of what's going on, how do you handle the situation? Because at one level, you want people to bring their whole self, right? That's one of the buzzwords. But actually, you also want them to do their job, right, professionally. How do you get the right balance between whole self and then a professional self when there's other things, influencing their mind from outside work?
This is such a thoughtful question, David, and you have um, exposed really the challenge of anything that becomes a popular framing of how things should be. I
Mm.
don't want to bring my whole self. My whole self may, on any given day, consist of things I don't want in that conference room or video conference with me. They will distract me from my purpose here today.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
And I think as a grown, mature person, I'm entitled to compartmentalize, which is different from requiring people to compartmentalize. It
Yes,
does
yes.
not work to do the thing that was said 30 years ago. You leave your personal baggage at the door. Once you're in here, you are functioning as the director of thus and so,
Mm,
and not as the person you are.
mm,
So, you know, we contain multitudes. We're complex. Some of it we like, some of it, even ourselves, we don't like.
mm.
I've always had a practice of if I was in a grim and grumpy mood, I would announce it at the beginning, not in the kind of watch out framing,
Yes, yes.
but it's really useful. And we certainly learned this during lockdowns in COVID. So useful just to spend a couple of moments so people can say how they are today. Because somebody might be bright and bushy tailed, and another person might be grim and grumpy. And acknowledging that lets you be a little more tender where that tenderness is needed. Be mindful that we are in different conditions and therefore not flare right away when something feels a little off or uncomfortable. But, and now I'm going to give you sort of several practices all at once, much too compressed.
Oh, please do.
Notice what's arising in our bodies. Oh, I'm feeling tense about that. Was it because of something someone else just said? Or maybe my compartment started to break through a little and I'm thinking about whatever problem I've got at home. I'm a little tense. Can I relax first before anything else happens? And if I can, then can I look at the big picture of what's happening? What just got said? What triggered me? Oh, I see. Now I can manage. It only takes a few seconds to do that once you're used to doing it. Instead of just assuming that the person across the table is a son of a gun and you're going for him hammer and tongs.
In some ways, it's like getting control of yourself, and then I guess making some conscious choices. And then I love that question of, how are we, or how are we showing up today? And the powerful thing about that is you're giving information for others to be aware of and to use. What it's not necessarily is an invitation to have a big therapy session, which some
Oh
people
gosh.
might want to
Yeah.
say. But it's information and insight. I mean, you and I will have worked with, advised, coached a whole range of different executives and professionals, and they all come with their different traits and characters and flaws. What are the ones that, if you think about other people trying to work in perhaps challenging, not always difficult, but stimulating environments, what were some of the traits that you would call out where you think, God, that's particularly tricky or difficult? Or, say, for example, I'll give you an example of one of mine. I found it quite hard to deal with really overly confident people. Not because I found it in some ways energizing because they came with a lot of energy. Oh, we can do this, can't we? That's fantastic. But their willingness to listen to any challenge, dissent, pragmatism, I found that just became very frustrating. It's like we all like the optimism, but when overconfidence then isn't tempered with serious thought, I found that quite frustrating. So there's if you like one example from me. Now friends and ex-colleagues will be thinking, is that me? Is that? I'm not going to name names. That'd be much more exciting, but not. I don't want lawyers on my back. What type of character types would you call out from your own experience?
As particularly difficult in this
Difficult
context.
or stimulating? Well, let's be positive perhaps as well. We thought, God,
Oh,
these
good.
people are really,
Thank you.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So on the difficult side, I would say there are lacks that I particularly do not enjoy. Lack of curiosity, I do not enjoy.
Mm.
Because someone who isn't interested in questioning even their own constructs
Mm.
is very hard to persuade even when the case is good.
Yes.
So
Yes.
lack of curiosity is one for me. Lack of candor is another.
Mm.
So really anything that goes in the direction of, I know the way it's got to be and it's going to be that way when we leave here. Go ahead, you try something. Someone who's presenting in that mode,
Yeah.
I don't choose to work with them, actually.
What a polite way of putting it. Yes.
On the flip side, what is wonderful, exciting, fun, and so I keep going back and going back. People who are self-reflective. People who want to know if there is a better way.
Mm.
People who are self-aware. Really, it's all the things that go into emotional intelligence.
Yes. Yes.
Because to be self-aware, to be self-regulating, and then to be open to whatever is presented, you can get somewhere with those people. And there's
Yes.
one other thing that there's a plus minus, because any of these taken too far is no good. And that's when a senior executive is fearful for some reason.
Mm.
People who are afraid of making decisions, afraid of taking action, even if they are otherwise curious, interesting, etc., they can stall a lot of progress. And so building them up and helping them see where they are not at risk, for example, or how they could move forward.
Mm.
Those are worthy areas of development. But someone who is known to be fearful and for whatever reason is not open to change at the time you need them, that's another one that I don't prefer.
Yes. There can be a big break on the organization's
Yes.
momentum.
Yes.
You talked there about a lot of self things, self-awareness, self-regulation, self-reflection. You talked about regulation earlier in terms of in the moment.
Yeah.
How do you do it? What practices can you use, especially in environments where the days are long, there's intensity, there's competing demands. I speak to and know a lot of people who want to do it, but you might say don't have the discipline perhaps to do it. I'm busy. I've got lots of things on. So how do you, in an environment where it's sort of an always on environment, either it's one you're in or you've created, how do you practice and develop more self-awareness and um, self-reflection?
So this is so simple-minded as to seem almost juvenile. The difficulty is in the application. The nuance is in the application.
Mm.
The first step is, let's take a pause. Stop action. A break. And you can say this to yourself, you can say it to a group. Let's take a pause. Let's stop. And then questioning what's actually going on here. What are the themes that are upsetting? What do we need to do to bring ourselves back into a calmer relationship? I'm not saying a harmonious relationship. I'm saying a
Yes,
calmer
yes.
relationship.
Mhm.
Usually, it is some combination of physical and then cognitive emotional.
Mm.
And there are all kinds of exercises, from breathing. We all know there are a gazillion breathing techniques, to actually using the body in a variety of ways. Sometimes it's getting energy out, and
Mm.
you can combine that with visualization. The techniques are not the issue. There's a score to choose from. They all work. None of them work for everybody.
Mm.
So you kind of need a bunch in your toolbox, but just stopping. Sometimes the
Stopping.
safest
Yeah,
thing you
yeah,
can
yeah.
do
It's
is
interesting on that,
stop.
Liz. I said to one person recently I was working with, I said, and it was a leading question. Consciously, I put my hand up. Right, I said, "What's stopping you shaving off 10 minutes at the end of your meetings to reflect, think, re-energize?" And I wasn't quite sure how that person would react because that's quite countercultural for them. I said, "Nothing, right?" And they literally just started taking their diary out and just scoring through things. So it's giving yourself permission. I'm curious about dynamics. We've been referring to dynamics of teams and organizations. And again, I want to put a positive, not spin, but more angle on an aspect that people often talk ill or in a bad way of, which is politics. Every organization has politics, even the small ones, even the startups, scale ups, not just the big
Correct.
incumbents. And people tend to say, oh, well, it's the politics that stop me do X, Y, and Z, or and so forth. How do you, in a nutshell, how do you make politics work for you in a good way whilst keeping your own sense of integrity?
I think a lot of this is a language thing again. If someone said you're political, you might feel insulted.
Mm.
But if someone said to you, oh, that's so sophisticated and savvy, you might feel complimented.
Yes, yes,
Um,
absolutely.
so
Be nice.
be being aware of the underlying themes and currents, being aware of how your fellow humans respond to things. I think the difference comes in where someone's commitment and intentions lie. If your commitment is to the good of the organization, to the good of your fellow executives, founders, whatever, to the good of the purpose we have for serving our customers, if that is truly your intention and it's everybody's intention and everybody understands it, then the maneuvering that happens to get things done is in service to that good, and we can self interrogate about it. We can check and make sure that our values are aligned. And then we can even say, well, I felt a little pushed when you were doing that.
Yes.
Next time, please come to me beforehand and just ask me. Those kinds of things. We can do it in the open. When my mother taught me how to play cards, we played open hand, and that's how I taught my kids. You can see what the other person is doing, and you can even say, oh, is that the thing you want to do? Here are the results that may accrue. It's when it is hidden, and we believe the only good way is to keep it hidden, and we know we're doing things in spite of what someone else might want, and in particular when we are serving ourselves. That's when it becomes the negative kind of political. Not that you should never serve yourself. I mean, if you haven't had a raise in 3 years, you should please figure out how to get one.
That's such a clear articulation. It's often politics is used as I think, often a lazy term by some people because they haven't done the work to understand what's really going on. And it's a lazy use of language. The way you talked about maneuvering to a goal, to an end goal, and being open about it is very powerful. I mean, again, if you talked about organizational dynamics or flows and ebbs and so on, people go, yeah, okay, well, I need to understand that in order to work out where I can position myself. If, however, you use the shorthand of, oh, this politics around here is really hard to fathom. It's like, well, okay, what do you actually mean? Again, decompressing it and so forth. Now, I want to link on to this is a beautiful segue onto your own recent project, which I'm sure there was no bad politics associated with at all. This Better at Work with Liz animation series, which I'm going to keep plugging because I think it's not only brilliantly executed, it clearly describes a series of work scenarios, challenging work scenarios, with you as the star, both behind the camera and obviously in the animation as the guest. Tell me, so it's better at workwithliz.com. That's what people should learn. There are 3 episodes now at the time of this recording. What are the biggest learnings you've had about developing such an innovative, creative product from the lens we've just been talking about, which is the dynamics between people? What have you learned about the team, about yourself? I'm curious.
The lessons about myself are the clearest. I do like coming up with my own way of expressing things. It would have been normal and typical to write a book, and I just didn't have one. So this seemed to be a good way for me. It meant that I did have to work with a significant team of people.
Yes.
One of the reasons, thank you, David, you've said such lovely things both here and other places about the animation. And I really feel that part of why it's so good is because it was a significant team with people who had expertise I do not have and never hope to have, frankly. And I had to learn a tremendous amount just to be able to talk about what we needed to do. Because, of course, I had all kinds of opinions, but they were uneducated. They're more educated now.
Yes.
And so coming back to our other themes, one of the things that was so important was even when I was unhappy about something, or there may have been hurt feelings, as we discussed what I liked, what I didn't like, what I was going to tolerate or not, is the idea that we are a team with a purpose. And I often restated the goals of the project to remind people that this was not just about being clever, which,
Yes.
we can try and do. It was not just about picking the thing that would make people laugh the most, because it wasn't entertainment, even though there is an entertaining aspect. And in the same way, having to stop myself from going for what might have felt more perfect to me, but wasn't necessary.
Right.
So being conscious of those things and also recognizing the animators were not business people. The director wasn't a business person. So they would sometimes start to go in directions that were not realistic for the content.
Right.
And then that was my job to bring that back. But knowing that we were a team and really working on caring about each other, which doesn't always come naturally.
The fact that you spent time understanding, I guess, the art of the possible, understanding what other people could contribute, learning to, I guess, tame some perfectionist tendencies and in a way care for people. I mean, these are such important characteristics, practices, and in addition, the thing I particularly admire is the fact that, given your success, given what you've done, in some ways you didn't need to do this, but the people would have gone for something safer. However, this is my view. Right? Oh, I'm more keen to hear yours. But the fact that you go for something that's creative, disruptive, different, true to you, hard, and other adjectives says a lot about, I think, your own mindset and your own practice, keeping it fresh, trying something new. Which, if you're working with you, if I was one of your clients, I'd think, yeah, gosh, he's pushing the boundaries, pushing the frontiers. So that's something I would just say I admire in terms of the innovative, self-disruptive element of this.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, partially because it was exhausting.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was hard. And stretching, not always in a comfortable way, but I like to stay interested, you know?
Mm. Mm.
And I guess I don't think of it so much as pushing, but more of seeing what else could be there. And on a really purely selfish, pragmatic note, besides all the creative expression desire and all of that, how good if I have something in the can that won't age? Because my hope is that the lessons are pretty timeless. This is meant to be
Yeah,
evergreen,
you're so right. You're so right. Because
timeless,
there are quite a lot of
human.
books. There's some. This is two of us who haven't read a book, but we've done other stuff in life, right?
Yeah.
We'll take that chip off our shoulder, or at least my shoulder. But there's quite a lot of books that 2 years later you think, wow, might have been good at the time, but not relevant now. So that's definitely the truth for you. We're talking about the here and now, but we're talking about impact, legacy. So I am curious, and I ask all my guests this question around, which is more philosophical, which is, as you look at your own impact, what impact are you looking to have on the world around you as you do your work?
When you asked that, my mind went back, I don't know, it's got to be 25 years, to a young woman who was supervising a work team and was struggling. And the thing I needed to teach her was actually math so that she could measure the work that her team was doing and then make better decisions. I would be so happy if people learned how to navigate the world better, how to think more. Um, because with those tools, who knows what they can go on and do? So, yes, the animation shows in a way ways that I would wish to be thought of. There's humor in there. There's a lot of clarity. And there are some pretty direct challenges. What's going
Absolutely.
on here? How can we make it better? But the idea that people can become more self-sufficient and therefore lead others in a better way, that for me, that is great because I just believe in workplace as a place of development for people and a place of experimentation and growth. And so anything that contributes to that, I'm very proud of.
Gosh, that's so inspiring. It's so uplifting. Really is. Coming back to the practical then, when you're having your best day, hopefully today is one of them, what helps you have your best day in terms of anything and everything you want? What if you look to the ingredients that help you have that great day? What would you pick out?
Fabulous conversation, for sure. Um, for sure. And learning something, either in the conversation, reading something. Those two things are like rest in a weird way.
Yes,
Yes, they are
they create
fuel.
fuel, don't they? They
Yeah,
energize you. They replenish you.
yeah.
Well, from my perspective, and I say this without looking for a response. This has been fabulous. You are fabulous. I love the way you express yourself so clearly and succinctly. You choose your words very carefully, and you're encouraging us to think more, to be more intentional. I guess there's an empowerment theme here, and to be transparent as we do so, right, in terms of how we want to be and how we want to come across, and an ambition in terms of let's develop, let's do some good things, let's grow, let's lead others in great ways. I take my hat off to you. It's been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you, David. I want to give you one caution, if I may, though, because that
Please,
sounds,
please.
the way you just said it sounds so inspiring and exciting, but it is also hard
I agree.
because it takes time. And that is what most of us feel we don't have. And so to carve out the time to do that, the upfront cost is clear, the benefits less so. So giving ourselves room sometimes when we don't feel we have it, that's hard. But it's wonderful. And I think it's worth it.
No, I think that's again so wise. I think we're in an environment where there's either an urge or a sense of competition that we have with either ourselves or others that leads us to have a producer performer mindset. I've got to do this, that, and the other. And actually, the time to think, reflect, talk that may not directly, immediately lead to anything can be compressed. And so there is something around, you have to put the hard work in, you have to learn, teach. And sometimes it takes longer. It's not just the immediate 1 hour, immediately something comes out, somebody gives you a pat on the back. And I think that's about discipline as well. But it's so important. But I still think you're brilliant and you're fabulous, even with the hard work. And it hasn't felt like hard work this afternoon. Liz, thank you for the conversation.
It's been a pleasure for me.
Thank you. And that was another edition of Lancefield on the Line. I do hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Check out the podcast, the YouTube channel, give us a nice rating. And of course, look at Better at Work with Liz and all of her other resources. Thank you ever so much again, Liz.